Welcome everybody to School of Illustration. In this tutorial, I will show you how to make this beautiful owl illustration using the pencil brushes. And remember, if you are a supporter in Monthly Brush Club, you can get all these brushes and texture papers within the illustration pack. First of all, just open one of the texture paper included within the set. And remember, every time that we use the texture paper, we need to draw in the layer underneath. I'm going to be using the main pencil brush because we're going to start sketching. And let's start doing the sketch of our illustration. As you can see here, I'm doing just some basic shapes as two like ovals. And once I have like the main shape, I start like rubbing out and doing more details such as like the ears of the part at the top of the owls, or just like some of the faces, like starting with a very basic shape and then after just adding some more small details. Don't you worry too much if your sketch is not perfect. I'm just getting the basic proportions and shapes to have an understanding of how the illustration is going to be looking and how things are positioned, but you can change and you will see that I will change as well many of these things later on. I have my sketch ready, so I'm going to lower the opacity and look, I'm going to create a layer on top to start refining and doing a more precise sketch on top. I'm using exactly the same brush as before, just the pencil brush, but you can use any other, and just go on top of the lines, just making your drawing much neater. One of the things that I like to do is to use the transformation tool to modify my sketch. For example, here, as you could see, I selected the face and just move it up. Remember, that is the way that I draw just because it works for me, doing the sketch in 2 steps and 2 different layers. But if you are a very neater artist, just draw everything from the beginning, which is probably taking, it would take shorter time. I like to be organized in my illustrations, so what I'm going to do now is to group both layers and call this group sketch. I'm also gonna hide the texture paper so it doesn't distract me when I'm selecting all the colors. I'm gonna lower the opacity of the proper sketch. I'm gonna create a new layer and I'm gonna start adding some basic color into the illustration. As you can see, I'm not doing any details, like just going and creating new layers, deciding which ones are going to be the main elements in my illustrations. But in this case, they're going to be the 2 owls. They're like 2 independent different layers. I'm going to also think about the position of them. Also, I'm going to create some more layers for some of the key elements in each owl. For example, one layer is for the face, another one for the eyes. And then what I'm going to do, same as before, I'm going to group all these layers and call this group of layers Owl 1. I'm going to do exactly the same, but with the second owl. One layer for the face. If you see, I'm using a lighter color of the body of the owl for both of them. I'm going to create another layer for the eyes, and then I'm going to group everything into a group of layers called Owl 2. I'm gonna start adding other details as the beak or the wings of the pink owl. I'll create a new layer and do finally the eyes. If you see what I'm doing, it is creating a new layer for each different color that I'm using. For example, one layer for the beak, one layer for the eyes, one layer for the face. When I'm doing the eyes, because both of them they have to be symmetrical, what I did is just duplicate the layer, and then with the transformation tool, I just move the other eye into the side. So then I know that both of them they are the same size. Once they're ready, I'm just going to merge both layers, and also with some white, I'm going to add some shine into them. I'm going to add now the tummy or the front part of the owl. So what I'm going to do is creating a new layer and select Creepy Mask. I'm going to use the same color as I did for the face, and I'm going to just color this part. Same as the other owl, I'm gonna create just a final layer for the legs. I'm going to hide the sketch now just to see how everything is looking, in case there is any parts that need to be fixed or lines that they need to be neater. I realized, for example, that the eyes, they don't look exactly as I like, so with the transformation tool, I'm going to move them and also make them a little bit bigger. Now it's time to color the branches, so I'm gonna take a dark brown and go over all the lines to cover all of them. The next step that I like to do in all the illustrations, it is to fix the edges. So I'm gonna take the coloring intense brush and I'm gonna go through each layer, selecting the color that I previously have used, and just like go over the edges, make them a little bit softer, adding some texture into them. It is just like a very simple process. I would go just like through every single edge of the layers, just creating the same texture. It is time now to add some texture and shadows into the illustration. I'm going to use the coloring irregular for that. Create a new layer on top of the main shape. I'm going to start with the orange owl and I'm going to change the layer mode into multiply because this is going to be a shadow layer. With a darker color, I'm going to just apply some texture randomly around the owl. Then I'm going to press harder and emphasize more on the parts where the shadow should go. For example, behind the pink owl. I'm gonna create a new clipping mask layer on top. This time it's gonna be in the layer mode screen because it's gonna be a highlight or lighter layer, and I'm gonna add some lighter areas into the owl. Lower the opacity if you wish, just until it looks the way that you like. I'm going to add some texture into the belly, but this time, instead of a clipping mask, I'm gonna just use Alpha Lock. And with a darker color, I'm gonna just, same as before, add some randomly texture, especially emphasizing behind the pink owl and at the bottom. For the first layer, exactly the same. I'm selecting Alpha Lock, and with a darker color, I'm just adding some texture into it. I'm going to repeat exactly the same process, but in the pink owl, starting with the clipping mask on top, into the multiply, just to add the shadows with a darker tone of pink, also like emphasizing in the areas where the shadow goes, such as at the bottom of the owl. I like creating the new layers for the shadows and lightening as I'm showing, because you can always lower the opacity and making your shadow layers as visible or transparent as you wish. For the wings, because they are like a smaller surface than the body, I'm not gonna create any new layers, and I'm gonna just like add some texture with a darker color right in the same layer using Alpha Lock, as you can see in the video. I'm gonna add some lightening now, so clipping mask on top of the body, a lighter pink, and just adding some randomly areas that they are lighter. I'm also adding some texture to the smaller areas using Alpha Lock as the face, the beak, and any other elements that you have. For the branches, I'm gonna do exactly the same. I'm gonna create a new layer using clipping mask for the light areas. I'm gonna also change the layer mode into screen. And then I'm gonna create another layer for the shadows using the multiply layer mode as is shown in the video. We are going to start adding some details. I'm going to be using two brushes, the pencil brush and the pencil tone. The difference it is that the pencil tone will change the color that we are using. So for example, if I use like an orange color and I paint, it will paint in different tones of the same color. I'll start adding details into the orange owl, and I'm going to create a clipping mask layer right on top, and I'm going to change the layer mode into screen. I'm going to start making some lines and shapes around the owl, more curve in the wing, and just like straight lines in the belly. I'm always following the shape of the owl, if you see around the face as well, some of them. I'm going to create a new layer, but this time I'm going to change the layer mode into multiply because I'm going to be using a darker color. And I'm going to do exactly the same shapes and lines that I did before, but just in a darker color. I love adding some more lines around the edges just to create some more dimension and volume. I'm going to add some details out as well around the face, but instead of adding a new clipping mask, I'm just going to change into a different color and do it in the same layer. And especially like emphasizing the edges of the eyes and the edges of the face. I'm going to repeat exactly the same process as I did with the orange owl into the pink one. Starting with the body, new layer right on top, clipping mask and screen for a more light lines. Mask, multiply, and let's do some dark lines now. I'm going to add some details around the face, same as I did before. I'm going to emphasize around the face with some dark lines to add more volume. And I'm going to just lower the opacity just until it looks the way that I like. I'm going to start doing the same now, however, with the wings. So I'm going to create a new layer on top, and I'm going to use it for the dark lines first. This time I'm going to use color burn instead of multiply. And then I'm going to create a new layer in the screen mode and add some of the light ones. Same as before, just I'm adding now some lines around the face just to add some more volume to it. And finally, the last part, it is to do the same with the branches. Exactly the same as before, a layer in clipping mask, screen mode to add some lines that are light, and one layer that it is multiply as to add some dark lines on top. Yeah, I'm doing always exactly the same thing, just to add some dark and light lines into every single element. I'm going to start now creating the background, and I'm going to create just a layer right at the bottom, and the brushes that I'm going to be using, they are the pencil textures. I recommend you, if you are doing this illustration, just play around with the brushes just to create some texture until it looks the way that you like. I just do experiment and just like rub out and try one brush or the others until I like how it looks. Also, I realized that the background is a little bit plain, so I'm gonna add some more details and tiny mountains at the back. So I'm gonna create just a new layer. I'm gonna use the normal pencil brush, and I'm gonna do just some circular shapes in the background that they're gonna be sort of like trees, like very geometric trees. I'm gonna create a new layer just to add a different tree color. And then what I'm gonna do is select alpha lock to start adding some texture into them. The way that I add texture, same as the owl, coloring irregular, and I'm gonna just use different colors just to add some texture to them. And finally, I'm gonna just create a new layer, use clipping mask, because I would like to add just some details inside. I'm gonna do in the pink tree some just like geometric lines inside, just creating the branches on it. I'm gonna change the layer mode into color burn because I just like the way that it looks. And I'm gonna do exactly the same into the other trees. This time I'm using a white color instead of a darker one, just for a change. I'm going to be changing the layer mode into add, lower the opacity, and that's it. I'm going to just group the layers just to keep organized, and then in the texture paper I'm just going to check if the colors they look right, and I'm going to lower the opacity of the layers just so it looks the way that I like. The final thing that I'm going to do is creating some snow. So I'm going to be using some of the weather brushes. You have this brush included within the illustration pack to download. And I'm gonna just spray some snow, change the layer mode into add, and just rub out any of the snowflakes that are on top of the owls. You also have this brush in the illustration pack. What I'm gonna do now is just to draw some snow in some areas where the snow would accumulate. You don't have to do this in a very neat way because snow not always look perfect. And now I'm gonna add some shadows into the snow. So I'm gonna select Alpha Lock, a blue color, and just add in some dark areas at the bottom. The final thing, I'm just gonna add some brightness into the eyes, and that's it. I hope you enjoy coming through with me to see how I do this illustration. And if you do it, please tag me so we will be able to see your designs. Thank you very much. Bye bye.